Lottie here at Neurocentric Rider Biomechanics. What I'm going to go through today is a little bit of an explanation on what Neurocentric Rider Biomechanics is and how a neurocentric approach to movement can massively help with your riding. So the first thing I want to explain is a neurocentric approach that looks at the nervous system and the brain and putting them at the centre of any movement patterns and stuff that we're doing. So, for example, if I was to do a bicep curl, I would want my bicep to contract. There's also some other stuff that happens, so we've got some lengthening through the tricep, we've got some stabilisation, there's other things that are going on. Now I want you to think, how does that actually happen? Is it just the bicep decides itself that it's going to contract? No, it's the brain. It's the brain that decides, I want to contract my bicep, I want to bring my hand towards my shoulder. So what happens is it sends a signal, your arm will say, right, okay, that's what I want to do. The brain will work out whether it's safe. It will send a signal down to the arm to allow you to contract that bicep. Now, if I was to put a 10 kilo weight in this hand, not sure I could bicep curl it, but if I was to put a 10 kilo weight in this hand, my body is going to have to increase the pressure that it puts through this bicep in order to get that movement, because it's now got something more to work against. But we've also got other things that start to happen. The brain and the body need to be able to stabilise the opposite side of the body in order for us not to fall over. So it has to work on something that we call tone. So in a neurocentric approach, what we look at is, yes, we look at the movements that come through from a particular area, but we also look at the tone that needs to be applied from the opposite side. Rather than looking at this as a muscular way, we deal with the brain, who we class as the boss, who sends the communications down. There's particular areas of the brain that we can work with that start to help increase tone from left to right, from front to back. But there's also other things that you can do using the brain and understanding the brain-based science to actually be able to get you to move better. So one of the things that I want you to think about is when you actually go to do something, how does it actually happen? And the main thing is, if you think of it as catching a ball, if someone was throwing a ball towards me, I would have to, one, decide that the ball is coming towards me, that I need to move in order to be able to catch it, or to try to catch it. I need to work out, using my visual system, where it's coming at, what direction, but also how fast that's coming. So I'm using my eyes for some input. And the body takes an input before it can make a decision. So it knows how fast it's coming and where it's coming at. My brain then needs to make a decision on where my hand needs to go, how fast, how hard am I going to need to catch this, but also to work on the accuracy of where that's going to be in space. So I need to know where I need to put my hand in order to be able to catch the ball. Once it's made that decision of where it all needs to be, it then needs to give the signals to my arm in order to be able to put it into that right place. And that's the loop that we work on in neurocentric rider biomechanics. So rather than just working on the muscles and the musculoskeletal system, which is the old school biomechanics way of doing things, we look at the actual input, so how your body is interpreting something, how the brain is dealing with it and whether it's dealing with it well, and then the output system, so how it's actually then communicating out to that particular area to say whether it's safe or not safe. Do you achieve the movement, not achieve the movement? So a lot of your old standard biomechanics type stuff looks at the output side of things. Now, if you've got an issue on the input or you've got an issue on your integration, so the way that the brain's dealing with things, your outputs will never get better. You'll find that you just pick up other compensations. So you learn how to do an output well, but you're still not changing the two things that need to come before it. So in a neurocentric approach, what we start to do is we look at whether you've got good inputs. Do you know how to talk to your ankle? Do you know how to talk to your knee? Do you know how to talk to your hip? When I say talk to it, do you know how to, one, can you feel it? But two, do you know how to move it? Have you got control of it in all of those movements? And we look at this joint by joint. From there, we then go on to the integration. So we look at your balance coordination, your eye's ability to move, your vestibular system. We look at the things that are in the brain and how they communicate out to say whether you're safe or not safe. And then the output side of things, we start to look at strength. Does your body know how to put the right amount of tone in one side in comparison to the other when one side is doing something? And we apply these all to a rider and your position when you're riding. Now, a lot of our riding stuff, we start on the ground. We teach you how to move correctly on the ground before we put it into sitting in the saddle. Then we put it into walk. Then we put it into trot work. And then we put it into canter work. You need to be able to go through the levels and be able to move and correctly make decisions without your body increasing tone or increasing a threat response, as we class it, whilst you're going through all of these. At that point of when you can do all of those, you can then start looking at things like your lateral work. Can you do something different left to right? So these all have a huge effect on your riding. But some of the things that start to make a massive difference is if you've had a previous injury. So if you've had a previous injury, for example, you've sprained your ankle, you've not done anything about it, you've just got on with it, and over 6 weeks, 8 weeks, it's been absolutely fine. But what you'll have found is that you've limped and compensated. So you'll have changed your inputs and your interpretation for 6 weeks. So your body is then adapted and it will have changed your output route. So even though you may have had an injury 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that can still play part in your movements today. So we look at being able to teach our riders a body reset. So if they were to have an injury, they know how to reset themselves neurologically and movement-wise to be able to get themselves back from scratch, back to riding. And this is where we educate our riders. We don't just do it ourselves, we educate our riders in making sure they know how and why it is important for these movements to be done. They're the key things that take on a neurocentric approach. So we look at how the brain and the body are talking to each other. Do they communicate, and can they communicate well by taking information in, dealing with it in the brain, and then giving a good output? And that's the main basis around our neurocentric approach. From there, we then start to look into a little bit of the neurology side of things on actually understanding how the body is moving, what systems communicate, which systems link in. Because you have to remember, we're one body. Every system has to work together. And if your brain thinks there is something threatening, it's going to reduce your range of motion, it's going to reduce your strength, it's going to reduce your balance, it's going to bring you into what we call the fetal position or a startle reflex to make sure that you are keeping yourself safe. And that's all your brain wants you to do. So what we have to do as riding biomechanic coaches is make your body safe, one on the ground, but two, more importantly, on the horse. So your brain feels that you can be as flexible, as supple, as relaxed as you can be in the saddle to get the best performance. And that's where our neurocentric approach to rider biomechanics comes in. So if you've got any questions, please pop us an email and we will speak to you all soon. Hope that helps.